President Trump is set to meet with Republican Finance Committee members today to talk about his domestic agenda, including tax cuts. Joining us now, Senator James Lankford is a member of the Finance Committee. So much to talk to you about. We don't have that much time. I wanted to talk to you about immigration, too, Senator, because your name became a household name among Democrats in terms of that bipartisan bill. But maybe we'll get that was not voted on, obviously, because of President Trump supposedly told members not to go with that. But let's start with, can we start with the the CR, the continuing resolution? Can we start with that?
Yeah, we can.
Who came up? Did you come up with Schumer shutdown? Do you know who came up with that?
I think Chuck Schumer actually came up with Schumer shutdown almost a month ago. He started talking about he wants to shut down the government to be able to protest the Trump policies and what he's doing. And so, yeah, I think actually Chuck Schumer actually invented the term Schumer shutdown on it. At the end of the day, we're going to keep this government open. It is not good for federal workers right now. They're going through a lot right now, and all the uncertainty of all the changes. Worst case scenario, you add on top of that all the uncertainty of a shutdown on it. Republicans have been very, very reasonable in this, quite frankly, on it. We've just said keep it open, same rate that we're open. Let's get through the rest of this year on this. No one's trying to toy with anything on it. Let's just keep it going status quo. Then let's fight it out in September for the next year at this point. And for whatever reason, Democrats have just screamed and complained about that.
Could you possibly, in the back of your mind, do you know 8 Democrats that you think are possibly going to go for this, or is it going to be some other route in the end?
Everybody's going to have to make a decision on it right now. There's a couple of options Democrats have, and I get what they're trying to do. They're trying to use the leverage that they have to say we're going to shut down the government if we don't get what we want. I get that. They're trying to use their sole bit of leverage. And in reality, they don't want to hurt federal workers either. They don't want to hurt the economy either. I think there are 8 reasonable Democrats that are going to step up and say, OK, let's keep it open. The other option they have is they could just not filibuster the bill. This bill would pass with 51 votes, and Republicans are ready to be able to pass it as long as Democrats don't filibuster the procedural motions. The procedural motions take 60. Final passage take 51. So if Democrats just want to say we're not going to filibuster it, we could still pass it on our own. So we'll see what actually happens.
Is there a conversation about that happening, Senator? I could see that being more palatable to some senators than saying that you supported
I've brought that up to several Democrats on this, and they have just said, hey, you can vote unanimously against it. If you want to just put your protest vote out there saying we want to shut down the government, just don't block us in the procedural motions. Just take us all the way to the last step on it, and then we'll all vote on it at that point, and they can lodge their complaint, understand. We can say we're going to keep the government open at status quo levels. And let's find out.
Is there something that they would get in return for that? Because I think that's part of the pain that Democrats are feeling right now is that they don't have any other option.
They wouldn't get the stigma of being the shutdown party.
Well, no, they wouldn't get that. The last time Chuck Schumer shut down the government is over complaints about DACA during the Trump presidency. We were shut down over the weekend, and Democrats then early in the next week all just said, no, this is silly. We don't have the leverage that we think we have at this point. Quite frankly, government shutdowns always feel like you've got tons of leverage until it actually happens, and then it ends up being in charge of the light brigade. It is that way for Republicans and Democrats alike. That's why I've been working very hard to say we got to take government shutdowns off the table entirely. I've got a bill that actually deals with that has bipartisan support. But every time we get to a moment like this, one side or the other runs away from it. At some point, we got to get off this terrible spot we're in the world stage where America fights about keeping their government open one way or the other. It's bad for our economy. It's bad for our position on the world stage. Let's have our budget fights, but let's not have shutdowns on it. That doesn't help.
I think the speaker yesterday said the big, beautiful bill timeline is May. Is that possible?
It is possible. The House is going to try to be able to pull that up. I'm not sure it's possible in the Senate at this point. We've got to be able to see their products. We're working on our side. We're all working on tax policy. We're not that far apart. We do have some disagreements in some areas. We all want to preserve the current tax levels for individuals, for small businesses. We want to preserve the current levels for corporations. We've got to deal with bonus depreciation. We've got to deal with the interest deductibility. We've got to deal with research and development. President Trump has talked a lot about no tax on tips and no tax on overtime. He wants several other tax pieces that are out there. We've got things on charitable donations, what are called IDCs for oil and gas, that is allowing them to be able to use their normal write-off like every other manufacturer does. So there's several different things that are out there that we have got to be resolved on it.
So, Senator, what I was going to ask you was, the border seems like it's closed now. You, through your best efforts, and you sincerely wanted to try to help with the bipartisan bill. But in the end, it almost looks like it gave Democrats an opportunity every time they got asked about leaving the border basically wide open for 3.5 years in the Biden administration. They were able to fall back and say, we tried to close it, but Donald Trump, with a bipartisan bill, told people not to vote for that. So that gave them this talking point when it didn't even need that bill. Do you feel like you were kind of used, or would you do anything differently? Because the border's closed. We didn't need that bill. You were able to close it if you just... Yeah, go ahead, Senator.
It's closed right now. It's a dramatic shift between the Biden presidency and a Trump presidency. A year and a half ago, we had 12,000 people a day illegally crossing the border. Now we have less than 200 people even trying. Huge difference under the same law. What I was trying to do was try to get a Biden president that at that time said there is no problem, there is no issue, he wouldn't even use the word crisis on it, to be able to close the border last year on it. We had 1 million people that crossed the border illegally from the time my bill failed until the Trump presidency came. So that's 1 million people that we've got to be able to resolve. That's also 70,000 what are called special interest aliens, that those individuals, we don't know their terror background on it. That's a problem. They're still in our country.
Well, we know how they'll vote. We know what party they'll vote.
I know the next president. I don't know the next president, how they're going to enforce it. So we were trying to put in place laws that would be consistent no matter who is the president.
Right. Hey, Senator, I have a DOJ question for you. There's a new report just out this morning that says that the DOJ group, which had been trying, I believe, publicly to show exactly what it was cutting on a daily basis and providing identifying information about it, has now limited that identifying information, which now makes it harder to actually track and see exactly what they're doing. Apparently, the White House has said that they are no longer providing those specific details for security purposes. Given the transparency that was pledged by the administration on this very issue, where do you stand?
Yeah, we need as much transparency as we can, but we've also got to be able to protect personally identifiable information. We've got to also track what's happening with federal employees and to be able to protect them as well in the process. So more information is better because there's a lot of false information out there. Every day there's a news story about somebody that have layoffs, and then they go and try to find that person with the layoffs and can't find them on that. In other areas, there's no story at all, and there were actual layoffs on it. So it's hard to be able to track it.
Right, but the other problem is that there were claims that were made that, there were savings of billions of dollars that turned out to be millions of dollars. And they were triple counting of some of the savings for, single contracts. They were canceling contracts, or saying they were canceling contracts that had ended under President George Bush. So I assume we can both agree that the transparency, to the extent that they're going to come out and say they're saving X amount of money, you would want to know where they're getting that money from, right?
100% I would want to know, and I think the American people want to know, and quite frankly, I think the administration wants to be able to get out there what's actually being saved and what's being done. I have long promoted to say, hey, if they're going to make change, the secretaries of the different agencies, they need to be involved. Members of Congress need to be involved. There are some mistakes that have been made. Elon Musk has said we had a situation in Oklahoma where they closed the lease on the U.S. Attorney's office. Well, we need the U.S. attorneys, actually, and so they had to flip back over and say, no, we're going to reopen that. So those mistakes can be avoided with greater transparency, and the American people need to know how much is actually being saved.